that in a public setting like this, trying to come up with any argument against trying to stop climate change is a little bit difficult. And so I will say that I very much appreciated the negative's focus on social justice. I felt like if we were going to go anywhere against that obligation of climate change, that was the right thing to think about. And so I very much appreciated that. I think that both teams did a wonderful job of bringing up different examples and doing so with a pretty good deal of clash. I will say there were a couple of things that overall I thought were interesting inconsistencies that I recognize will come up in debate anyway. I almost laughed a little bit as you brought up evidence that climate change wasn't as much of a problem in order to combat that we really needed to have everybody involved. Because I felt like what you were doing with the social justice argument was so poignant, and to say that it's really not about what all of these developed countries that have already messed up the world should tell everybody else to do. And so there are a couple of inconsistencies that I thought, wow, it would be great if you just sort of stuck with those kinds of values. And on the affirmative side, I thought it was really, I guess, interesting to not discuss more what the kind of industries specifically are that are moving into developed countries, that are helping them increase their economies, because doesn't that kind of turn a little bit about what we're talking about? If Western companies are just going to leave Western nations and move into developed countries, then that seemed like something worth discussing. In the end, I think if I were going to vote for one team, which is a very difficult choice in my mind, I will say that I think that developed countries really should take on that responsibility, and I don't know that we do have the right to ask our developing countries to do that. So I will go with the negative team for this time. Thank you.
I also, Christina, I think you guys did a great job, in especially in adapting to the circumstances and presenting a compelling argument. It is hard, and I think my personal instinct is to walk in. Well, of course, everyone has an obligation to address climate change. It's kind of my natural, like walking in assumption, to try to set that aside as best I can. I think, like many arguments, this comes down to the terms of engagement, about what the argument really is about. And I think that the negative did a really nice job of coming up with a consistent thematic setting in which to debate the round, and the affirmative, I felt, was more kind of trying to find a way out of the box that they had been placed in. And it's a challenging position. That's a successful strategic maneuver by the negative to say, look, here's what we're going to debate. We're going to define the parameters in a way that is essentially very hard to get out of, and then you guys are trying really hard to get out of that, as opposed to, I thought, at least not consistently presenting, say, here's an alternative framework that we can do from the beginning that really rebuts what they're doing, because they have set up a framework that really attacks your premises, and the contrary is not, you're debating on their ground, basically, is a short way to say it. So I'm convinced ultimately by the argument that that given a choice between two alternatives and a necessary trade-off that I thought was persuasively argued, you can't ask someone to have an obligation to do something that's in the long term and global in nature, as opposed to in the short term and is desperate for that particular country. I think I can't. And I will say, personally, I kind of feel persuaded in general to take more care of this discussion, because this is a debate that I followed as in a matter of politics and personal opinion, and I frankly was kind of dismissive of the arguments from people in developing worlds or representing their viewpoints, and I will say I'm persuaded by some of the points you guys made, which I think is to your credit. Nice job.
Yeah. First of all, I feel jealous, because I wish I could have that sort of talent debating in front of the public. So I have 4 children, and all my children were educated in English-speaking countries, and from that age, I realized that being able to speak in public and debating like you guys did, it's a tremendous asset. And I don't have that, and I wish I could. So maybe one day. So. You did a great job. I'm not going to say one side won, so because I know how hard it is to, especially on a global problem like this one, climate change, and global warming, and you have like trusting people. It comes down to do you trust and nudge people as opposed to regulation, and again, running a family is pretty much like that. You understand from day one that you need soft rules all the time, and you have to switch from like sticking to the rules, and then the next minute you have to feel empathy for and it is so hard. And so I appreciate that you could this debate went so well. Being the science and technology attaché, I was surprised that nothing came up about technology or science at one point. Especially in the US, where there are many, in San Francisco, incredible, sometimes far-fetched, but incredible things that are come up about technology for climate change. I'm not specifically talking about geoengineering, but autonomous cars and many things, robotics, and people sometimes tend to feel that there's a third way, that technology will somehow solve it all. So I was kind of surprised that nothing came up about technology. One other thing, maybe, I don't know, I'm not familiar with debates like this, but it's, I realize that you use quotes from sometimes very famous people, sometimes less famous people, and there's no storytelling whatsoever. I mean, you're talking about some people in whatever, in Uganda, and at some point, sometimes I thought there would be a little snapshot, a history about someone doing something that I could relate to. Yeah, that's about it. But it's again, congratulations. It's amazing. I learned a lot. I'll steal some arguments from you guys. Writing my notes for the ambassador. Thanks a lot. Great job.
Yes, as Philippe said, I also wanted to congratulate you because I was very impressed the way you debated and the argument you proposed. And I think the argument from the for the negative against the motion were very strong. Colonization argument was focused, distinction between consumption and production. But also, it was, I think, very difficult to defend an obligation. It's very difficult to defend an obligation for states and for developing countries. It's very difficult. So I found also your arguments were very also quite strong and very. It was so I was very impressed and congratulations, really. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I also found this debate very interesting. In the past, I've been part of some negotiations with developing countries about climate change, and most of the points we have done, especially for the negative team, were points that were made by countries such as India, China. So I was really impressed because there as well is a kind of arguments that you could hear during this debate. So it was very good. You had the golden argument. You've got the moral argument, which is a very difficult argument to go against. So you had a strong position, and in fact you had the most difficult job to do, because to go against the moral argument is very difficult. But I think that there's also quite a lot of arguments that you explained, economic arguments, technical arguments, and it was also a very comprehensive presentation. There is also another argument that you could use, but it's a very dangerous one, which is a cynical argument that maybe we're wrong, maybe it's not fair that you also, that the developing countries also have to take part of the burden, but you have no choice because of the consequences that even if it is not your fault, even if you're not involved in this situation, you will be the one that is going to pay the highest price in this situation. So you have no choice even, but it's a difficult argument and it's a dangerous argument. Once again, thank you very much for the very good job you have done, and as Philippe, I have learned a lot, and I am extremely admirative about your capability and your ability to speak in public and to defend your position in a very gentle way. You're doing this very well. So once again, thank you very much for all this work. And I think that we've got some gifts for you that we hope you will enjoy as a token of our appreciation of the job. And then as you are in the French Consulate, we will have a glass of wine to celebrate